No one wanted her. Not the buyers, not the pack, not even the gods. An Omega girl, shackled and humiliated, sold like broken glass at the auction block. But when the Alpha King himself steps from the crowd and buys her for 100 gold, everything changes. Because he doesn't need a servant. He needs a healer. And in a kingdom built on blood, her mercy might be the most dangerous power of all. The iron cuffs biting into Enid's wrists had long since rubbed her skin raw, but she didn't flinch anymore. The pain was background noise now, just another reminder of how far she'd fallen. The auction square smelled of damp wood, sweat, and fear. Rows of Omegas lined the stage like unwanted livestock, eyes down, bodies trembling under the morning sun. Enid stood among them, her bare feet pressed against the splintered planks, her gaze fixed on the dirt below. "Next lot," barked the auctioneer, a burly man with a voice that could slice through stone. Female, 20 years, literate, obedient, tamed. He grabbed Enid by the chin, jerking her face upward. She bit back a gasp as sunlight burned her eyes. "Look here," he said to the crowd, forcing a smile. Decent teeth, all her limbs a bit thin, but that can be fixed. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Enid's stomach twisted. Her pulse drummed in her ears as potential buyers leaned closer. Men with greedy eyes. Women with calculating stares. She was no longer a wolf to them, just a tool, a servant, a body to command. Starting bid, 50 silver. The silence that followed was heavy. A gull shrieked somewhere overhead. No one moved. 30. The auctioneer tried, his confidence faltering. Still nothing. Too plain. Too weak. Too Omega. Enid's mind drifted back to the night her pack burned. The fire. The screams. The Alpha who abandoned her because she couldn't shift fast enough to fight. She'd been the healer, the soft one. The one who had pups while the others bled on the field. When the smoke cleared, raiders had taken her instead of killing her. Maybe that had been the crueler fate. 20 silver, a voice finally growled. The crowd parted for the man who spoke. Broad shoulders. Greasy hair. A scar across his jaw. His smirk promised only cruelty. "That's generous for that one," someone muttered. "Garen of the Bloodtooth clan offers 20, the auctioneer declared, relief washing through his face. Garen sauntered closer, eyes running over Enid like a butcher judging a carcass. 10, if we're being honest, he said. "She looks half-starved." The crowd chuckled. 15, the auctioneer tried weakly. 10, Garen repeated, flicking a coin between his fingers. "Take it or I walk." Enid's throat burned.
She didn't beg. She didn't speak.
Words never helped. 10 it is, the auctioneer sighed. And then, silence again. Not the uneasy quiet of disinterest. Something heavier. The air shifted. A low ripple of growls spread through the crowd as every wolf in the square stiffened. Power rolled over them like a tide, sharp, cold, absolute. Enid's wolf stirred weakly inside her, pressing low in submission. Her breath caught as the murmurs began. "The Alpha King," someone whispered. No, he wouldn't come here himself. The crowd split like water, bodies dropping to their knees. Boots clicked against the wood as a tall figure strode into view. Enid dared to look up. He wore black armor etched with silver, his cloak trimmed in the fur of some great beast. His eyes, a strange, molten gold, scanned the stage, and when they landed on her, her heart stopped. 100 gold, he said. The marketplace fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The auctioneer gaped. "And my lord, did you say? You doubt me?" "No, my king." Garen's smirk faltered. "I saw her first," he barked. The Alpha King's gaze shifted, lazy and lethal. "Then be grateful you still draw breath," he said softly. Garen paled and backed away. The king stepped onto the platform. He stood close enough that Enid could smell the cold metal of his armor and the faint scent of pine and frost clinging to him. He didn't touch her, just studied her. "You're a healer," he said, not asked. "Yes, my lord," she whispered. "Trained by the Silverclaw elders before the fall." "Good." He turned away. "Rowan," he called, and a massive warrior appeared from the crowd. Take her to the keep. Feed her. Clean her. Enid blinked. Wait. A heavy hand gripped her shoulder. Don't, Rowan murmured, his tone firm. Rule 1. Don't speak to the Alpha King unless he speaks first. Rule 2. Never meet his eyes. Your property now, girl. But valuable property. The words sank like stones. Enid followed as the crowd parted for them. Her chains rattled with each step. Behind her, the marketplace buzzed with whispers. The Alpha King, Carl of the Northern Peaks, had just spent 100 gold on a broken Omega no one else wanted. And Enid had no idea why. The journey to the king's fortress was long and cruel. Enid's bare feet bled before the first day was over, leaving faint red prints in the mountain dust. The soldiers who flanked her didn't bother to hide their amusement. To them, she was a joke, the fragile Omega their mighty king had wasted gold on. Keep up, healer, one sneered, his wolf-amber eyes gleaming with disdain. Didn't realize Omegas came without spines. Another laughed. Maybe he bought her for decoration. She'll look nice kneeling by the throne. Rowan shot them a warning glare, but he didn't correct them. He merely grunted, and that silence told Enid enough. Even he didn't understand the king's decision. They climbed higher into the mountains, where mist hugged the cliffs and the wind howled like distant wolves. Enid's legs trembled with every step. Her wolf, starved, weak, barely stirred inside her. She'd gone too long without shifting, too long without food. By the third night, exhaustion won. She collapsed into the dirt, her body refusing to move another inch. Leave her, one soldier muttered. Dead weight. She won't last the week, another agreed. Enid barely heard them. The world spun, her heartbeat slowing in her ears. If this was the end, it was quiet at least. Better than the screams that had haunted her since her pack fell. Then boots crunched beside her face. A scent hit her. Pine, smoke, steel, and something impossibly wild. She tried to lift her head and froze.
Carl.
The Alpha King himself crouched beside her, his golden eyes assessing her with a look she couldn't name. Not pity. Not anger. Something in between. Why didn't you tell them to stop? He asked quietly. Enid's lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat was dry as sand. He sighed and slipped his arms beneath her. The murmurs around them fell to stunned silence as he lifted her effortlessly off the ground. He carried her as if she weighed nothing. The soldiers bowed their heads and stepped aside. Enid's pulse hammered as her face pressed against the cool metal of his breastplate. His heart beat steady and strong beneath it, a rhythm she wanted to memorize. He didn't speak again, and she didn't dare. But for the first time in months, she felt safe. By dawn, they reached the fortress, a citadel carved into the mountainside itself. Dark stone towers rose into the clouds, their spires crowned with banners bearing a wolf's head sigil. It was beautiful, in a cold, merciless way. As they passed through the gates, Enid caught sight of the warriors training in the courtyard. Every strike was brutal, efficient. They fought not to practice, but to destroy. Even the children sparred with grim focus, their laughter absent. Carl set her gently on her feet. Mara, he called. A woman emerged from the shadows, tall, severe, wrapped in gray wool. Her sharp eyes flicked to Enid, assessing her the same way one might examine an animal with a broken leg.
She's yours for now, Carl said.
See that she eats. She'll serve as healer when needed. Mara bowed. Yes, my king. Enid wanted to thank him. The words sat on her tongue, heavy and dangerous. She said nothing as he turned and strode away, his cloak whipping behind him like a storm. But the silence that followed was broken by another voice, deep and amused. Welcome home, nephew. A tall man stepped from the archway, dressed in black. His resemblance to Carl was unmistakable, the same strong build, the same golden eyes, but colder, harder. His smile was poison wrapped in silk. Uncle Darius, Carl greeted evenly. Darius's gaze flicked to Enid. So, this is the Omega you paid 100 gold for? He laughed softly. You've changed, boy. The old you would have left her for the crows.
She was useful, Carl replied.
Useful? Darius stepped closer, circling her like a predator. I see no use here. Just weakness. Enid's chest tightened. Her wolf whimpered inside her, begging to vanish. Carl's voice stayed calm, but there was steel under the surface. Your concern is noted. Darius's smirk deepened. Careful, nephew. The pack watches every move you make. Show them mercy, and they'll call it weakness. He brushed past Carl and vanished into the fortress. Enid's knees nearly buckled from the tension left behind. Mara cleared her throat sharply. You'll follow me, she said. Keep your eyes down and your mouth shut, and you might live long enough to earn a name here. Enid obeyed, but as she glanced once over her shoulder, she caught sight of Carl watching her go, unreadable, distant. And yet, there was something there, a flicker she couldn't define. Regret, maybe. Or curiosity. For the first time in months, she felt the faint spark of something dangerous.
Hope.
3 weeks passed before Enid learned the rhythm of the fortress. Dawn began with steel. Every morning, the clang of weapons echoed across the courtyard, sharp and relentless. The warriors fought until their knuckles bled, until their lungs burned, until Mara's horn signaled the end of drills. Then came silence, the strange, heavy kind that made the fortress feel like a breathing beast, waiting for its next command. Enid worked in the lower halls, cleaning, mending, fetching water. No one asked her to heal. In fact, the few times she offered, she was met with scorn. The first time, a young soldier dislocated his shoulder during combat training. His arm hung at an awkward angle, the pain twisting his face. Enid stepped forward instinctively. I can fix that, she said gently. The boy recoiled as if she'd threatened him. Keep your Omega hands off me, he snarled. Real wolves heal themselves. But it's only I said stay away. Laughter erupted around them. The other soldiers watched her with contempt, muttering words like weakling and cursed blood. Rowan appeared moments later, his expression hard. Get back to work, he ordered quietly. The king gave no instruction for you to meddle. That night, as Enid scrubbed floors until her hands ached, she couldn't stop hearing their laughter. Why had Carl bought her? Why ask about her healing if he intended to bury her among servants? The question consumed her until one evening, when fate, or maybe folly, gave her a chance to ask. Carl entered the great hall during supper, his voice steady as he discussed border raids with his captains. Enid, carrying a tray of bread, felt her pulse quicken. The urge to speak rose like a tide. She couldn't stop. She took a step forward. My lord. The word barely left her lips before a dozen heads turned. The air went still. Rowan was on her in seconds, his grip iron around her arm. You do not speak unless spoken to, he hissed. Carl's gaze found her then, cold, unreadable. Is there something you wish to say, Omega? Every instinct screamed at her to bow, to apologize, to vanish. But the question was already burning in her throat. You bought me as a healer, she said softly. But I'm not permitted to heal. Why? The room tensed. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. One of the advisors scoffed. She questions you, my king. Punish her insolence. Carl's expression didn't change. I have my reasons, he said finally. Enid's heart sank. That wasn't an answer. Yes, my lord, she whispered. See that she remembers her place, Carl told Rowan. Then, without another glance, he continued his discussion as if she'd never spoken. Rowan half-dragged her from the room. You're lucky he didn't have you flogged, he muttered. I just wanted to understand, Enid said, trembling. Understanding won't keep you alive here. That night, she cried quietly into her straw pillow, hating herself for hoping the Alpha King had been different. But fate had a cruel sense of timing. The very next morning, the sound of a scream shattered the courtyard. A boy, barely 12, one of the trainees, had fallen during aerial sparring. His leg bent wrong, bone jutting white through the skin. The other warriors stood around him, watching impassively. Get up, one barked. You fall, you fail. He's broken, Enid shouted before she could stop herself. Darius strode forward from the shadows, a cruel smile twisting his mouth. Broken. He grabbed the boy's leg and twisted sharply. The child's scream pierced the air. Weakness must be burned out, Darius said calmly. Pain is the forge of power. Enid couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Stop, she cried, rushing forward. Hands glowed with soft, white light as her power flared to life for the first time in months. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she knelt beside the boy, ignoring the blood, the dirt, the stares. Warmth spread from her palms. The twisted bones slid back into place. Skin knit itself whole. The boy's sobs quieted, replaced by stunned disbelief. When she looked up, Darius's expression was thunderous. You dare defy our ways? He hissed. Enid's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. He was dying. Then he was weak. Before he could strike her, another voice cut through the chaos. Low, commanding, unyielding. Enough. Carl stood at the edge of the crowd, golden eyes fixed on her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Darius turned on him. She undermines everything we've built. You cannot. The boy will live, Carl interrupted. His tone was calm, final. Return him to training once he recovers. The warriors obeyed instantly. Enid expected punishment, but instead, Carl's gaze lingered on her. Not cold this time, but curious. Troubled. Take her back to her quarters, he ordered quietly. As Rowan led her away, Enid felt Darius's hatred burn into her back like flame. But deeper than that, beneath the fear, something else stirred. The Alpha King had protected her, and that terrified her more than anything. The fortress didn't sleep easily after the courtyard incident. Whispers chased Enid through every corridor she scrubbed. The Omega healed the boy. The king defended her. Maybe he's gone soft. Servants ducked away when she passed, afraid of being seen with her. The warriors sneered louder than before, perhaps to prove they weren't sympathetic. Still, the boy she had healed, young Rian, bowed his head each time he saw her. A small act of gratitude, one that made her heart ache with equal parts pride and dread. 3 nights later, a knock came at her door. It wasn't gentle. Enid of Silverclaw, a soldier barked. She stood quickly, her heart tripping. Yes, the king summons you.
Now.
Her hands shook as she tied her thin cloak. The last time she'd spoken to Carl, he dismissed her in front of his court. Had he changed his mind? Was this a trial? A punishment for defying Darius? The soldier led her through unfamiliar halls, climbing to the high towers where only the Alpha King and his council were permitted. The air here smelled of smoke and pine resin, clean but heavy. Power lived in these stones. They stopped before tall oak doors carved with the image of 2 wolves entwined in battle. The soldier knocked twice, then stepped aside. Enter, came the king's voice. The door swung open. Firelight spilled across a wide chamber lined with tapestries of old wars and maps inked in blood. But what caught Enid's breath wasn't the wealth, it was the warmth. Furs on the chairs. A half-finished meal by the hearth. A place that felt lived in, not just ruled from. Carl stood at the window, his armor set aside for a simple tunic that made him look less like a conqueror and more like a man. Yet the power he radiated was unmistakable. He turned as she entered, those gold eyes finding her immediately. Leave us, he told the guard. The door shut behind her with a thud. Silence stretched until Enid could hear her own heartbeat. My lord, she began, keeping her eyes low. If this is about the courtyard. It is. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it.
Come closer.
She obeyed, the floor cool beneath her bare feet. When she stopped a few paces away, he studied her as if trying to decide what kind of creature she was. You healed the boy. Yes, my lord. I couldn't. You disobeyed an order. Enid's throat tightened. You said I was to heal when needed. Not when my uncle calls for pain as lesson. Her chest rose and fell quickly. A lesson that would have killed him, my king. I couldn't just stand by. He turned fully toward her then, his expression unreadable. You sound very sure of yourself, Omega. I'm sure of mercy, she said before she could stop herself. Carl's brow furrowed. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but memory. He walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate. Mercy, he repeated. Do you know what mercy cost me? Enid dared to glance up. The scar beneath his jaw caught the firelight. When I was a boy, he said quietly, our pack believed as you do. That kindness made us strong. That helping others would earn their loyalty. We were wrong. He stopped at the hearth, staring into the flames. The Red Fong tribe came in the dead of winter. They asked for shelter. We gave it. They killed my father before dawn. His voice was low but trembling with old fury. I watched them burn my mother's body while I hid in the snow. Darius found me. He taught me that compassion is the enemy of survival. Enid swallowed hard. I'm sorry, she whispered. Carl turned his gaze on her again. Don't be. He saved me. And I built an empire strong enough that no one will ever burn it again. He stepped closer, so near she could see the faint shimmer of his wolf under his skin. But now you've brought light into my fortress, and my people don't know whether to fear it or worship it. I didn't mean to cause trouble, Enid said softly. I only wanted to help. I know. His tone softened. And that's what makes it dangerous. The tension in the room thickened until she couldn't breathe. His scent filled her senses. Wild forest after rain, cold air over steel. For a moment, he looked almost human in his weariness. You will heal only when I command it, he said finally. No one else. Yes, my lord. Carl studied her face a moment longer, as if memorizing something about it, then nodded.
Good.
That will be all. She bowed, relief and disappointment tingling inside her. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her again. Enid. She froze. Stay clear of Darius, he said quietly. If he seeks you out, you come to me. Do you understand? She turned, startled by the warning. Yes, my lord. For a heartbeat, they stood in the firelight, king and captive, predator and healer. And the air between them hummed with something neither dared name. Then he looked away, dismissing her with a single word. Go. That night, Enid lay awake, staring at the stone ceiling of her quarters. The fortress outside was silent except for the distant echo of howling wolves. Her hands still glowed faintly with memory, the same warmth she'd felt when healing, but now pulsing in her chest instead. She didn't know if it was fear, or something far more dangerous. Days stretched into weeks. The fortress seemed calmer on the surface, but beneath it something restless stirred. Whispers, glances, the faint electric tension of a wound that refused to heal. Enid felt it in the way people watched her, half afraid, half fascinated. They called her the moon-blessed behind her back. A curse or a prayer, depending on who spoke it. Carl didn't summon her again, not for many days, but his presence was everywhere. She heard his voice in the courtyard barking commands, saw him sparring with warriors, training until even the veterans staggered from exhaustion. At night, she dreamed of that same voice, low and steady, whispering her name just before she woke. And Darius? He watched her, too. Always from the corners of corridors, from shadowed doorways where the torchlight couldn't reach. His eyes glinted pale and hungry, as if he was studying a contagion that had infected his perfect order. Be careful, Rowan warned one morning as she carried herbs to the infirmary. Darius has long memory and short mercy. Keep your head down. I'm trying, she murmured. He gave her a sympathetic look. Try harder. But it wasn't in her nature to stay invisible, not when pain was everywhere. One afternoon, a kitchen maid burned her hands on boiling broth. She bit her lips so hard it bled, trying not to cry as her skin blistered. Enid took her aside, whispering, "Hold still." Light shimmered between Enid's palms, soft and silver. The burns faded. The girl stared in awe, tears welling, not from pain this time, but relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Tell no one," Enid said quickly. But word spread, as secrets always do. Servants began seeking her out quietly, At night, in the washrooms, behind storerooms where the guards never patrolled. A soldier with a festering wound, a stable hand with a broken rib, a child with a fever. Enid healed them all. Each act was a risk. Each time, she waited for a knock on her door that never came. And yet, the fortress began to change. Laughter returned to corners that had known only orders and silence. The kitchen hummed with song. Even the warriors seemed less harsh, sparring without breaking bones, shouting encouragement instead of curses. It was fragile hope, and Enid knew it couldn't last. Her worst fear came true on the 21st night. A hunting patrol returned bloodied and limping. 3 men carried a 4th whose leg had been torn nearly off by a rogue wolf. Enid happened to be in the courtyard when they stumbled in. "Get him to the healer's wing." Rowan barked. "There's no time," one man gasped. The wounded soldier's breathing rattled, shallow and desperate. Enid didn't think, she ran. Her power flared before anyone could stop her. The smell of blood and iron filled the air as she pressed her glowing hands against the gaping wound. Light poured through her fingers, knitting torn muscle, sealing flesh. When it was done, the man gasped once, then opened his eyes.
Alive. Whole.
The courtyard fell utterly silent. Then applause broke out. Not mocking this time, but grateful. "She saved him," someone shouted. Enid's relief died the moment she heard Darius's voice. "What is the meaning of this?" He strode from the shadows, fury etched in every line of his face. His gaze cut through the soldiers like knives until it found her. "You disobeyed again," he said. "You were told to heal only by royal order." "He was dying," Enid said quietly. "Then he should have died." Darius roared. "Weakness spreads like rot. You poison our strength with your softness." Before she could step back, his hand shot out, seizing her wrist. "I should burn this corruption out of you myself. Let her go." The command came like thunder. Carl stood at the edge of the crowd, armor half undone, hair wind-tossed, eyes glowing like molten metal. The courtyard went still. "Release her," he repeated, each word dripping authority. Darius hesitated, then dropped her wrist. "She defies you, nephew. She defies me. You cannot keep shielding this witch." Carl's gaze never wavered. "She saved one of my soldiers. That is not defiance. That is service." Darius's jaw flexed. "You've grown sentimental. It will get us all killed." "Perhaps it will make us live," Carl shot back. "Go, uncle. Before I forget your age." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Darius's face darkened, but he bowed stiffly. "As you wish, my king." When he left, Carl turned to Enid. His voice softened just enough for only her to hear. "You risked your life to save his. Why?" She blinked up at him, confused. "Because no one else would." Something shifted in his eyes, like a door opening and then quickly shutting again. "Next time, tell me first." "Yes, my lord." He turned to leave, but paused. "And Enid?" "Yes. You did well." She stood frozen as he disappeared into the keep, her heart pounding. Those 2 words replayed in her head all night like a melody she couldn't forget. And for the first time since her capture, she realized something terrifying. She didn't just respect her captor. She was beginning to care for him. The fortress awoke before dawn to the sound of horns, deep, rolling notes that shuddered through the mountain stone. When Enid rushed to the battlements, she found the courtyard alive with chaos and purpose. Hundreds of warriors gathered in dark ranks, their armor gleaming, their wolves pacing restlessly at their sides. At their head sat Carl, astride a massive black steed. His gold eyes swept over his army, calm amid the storm. He looked untouchable in that moment, every inch the Alpha King the legends whispered about. Darius stood beside him, pale and severe. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Mara, standing near Enid, whispered, "The Red Fang clan has moved south. The king rides to crush them before they reach our borders." Enid's chest tightened. The Red Fang, the same tribe that had destroyed his family. Carl raised his hand, and silence fell like snowfall. "We fight not for bloodlust," he said, his voice carrying over the courtyard, "but for the safety of our pack, for our home. We will return stronger." 1,000 voices roared as one. For the king. And then, with a thunder of hooves and claws, they were gone, disappearing into the mist like shadows returning to the wild. For the first time since she'd arrived, the fortress felt empty. The days that followed were heavy with absence. The laughter Enid had rekindled dimmed again. Without Karl's commanding presence, Darius ruled in his stead, and his rule was colder than winter. He reinstated brutal training, punished mistakes with lashes, and forbade all unauthorized healing. But pain has its own ways of finding light. It began with a knock one night. The same kitchen maid Enid had once healed stood trembling at her door, holding her hand close to her chest. "Please," she whispered. "I tried to be careful. The cook, he'll beat me if he sees this burn." Enid hesitated only a second before pulling her inside. When the burn faded beneath her touch, tears filled the girl's eyes. "I told no one last time," she promised. "I know," Enid said. "Go quickly." But whispers move faster than fear. Within days, others came, servants limping, children fevered, even a soldier who slipped in under cloak of night. "I can't let Darius see me," he said, voice low. "But if you don't help, the wound will fester. I'll lose my leg." Enid pressed her hands to the wound and prayed the light within her wouldn't betray them. The man gasped when it closed cleanly whole. "You're a gift," he murmured. "Don't let them take that from you." As the days turned into weeks, the fortress began to change once more. Servants started humming softly while they worked. Guards nodded to one another instead of growling. Children played in corners once filled with silence. The transformation was subtle but unstoppable. It was as though her healing seeped into the very stones, softening edges that had only ever known hardness. Yet peace never lasted long under Darius. He noticed the smiles first, the sudden spark of life among the servants, the faint laughter echoing from the halls that had long been tomb quiet. And then, one afternoon, a soldier stumbled into the courtyard, his shirt torn open to reveal a wound still faintly glowing with silver light. Darius's eyes narrowed. "Who healed you?" he demanded. The man's throat worked. I fell during patrol. The Omega." Darius struck him across the mouth. "Where is she?" By the time the warning reached Enid, she was already running. Her breath came in gasps as she darted through servant corridors, heart pounding. She didn't know where she meant to go, only away. But she didn't get far. 2 guards caught her near the stables. Darius appeared moments later, his expression almost serene. "There you are," he said softly. "The king will be so pleased to learn how well you obeyed his orders." Enid's pulse raced. You can't touch me," the king said. "The king isn't here." His smile was sharp. "And I don't answer to ghosts." He raised a hand, and then the sound of horns shattered the air. The fortress erupted into chaos. Gates opened. Riders poured through, shouting triumphantly. Karl had returned. Dust and blood clung to his armor, but his eyes burned with fierce, living fire. The warriors behind him carried trophies of victory. The red fong had fallen. Darius's expression flickered, something between fury and disbelief. Enid sank to her knees, half in relief, half in shock. She hadn't realized until that moment how tightly she'd been holding herself together. Karl dismounted, scanning the courtyard. His gaze landed on her, breathless and cornered. Then he saw Darius. "Uncle," he said slowly. "Explain." Darius's hand fell from his weapon. "She broke your command. She healed without permission." Again. Karl's eyes moved to the still bleeding soldier behind him. "Did you live?" "Yes, my king," the man rasped. Karl's jaw clenched. "Then she did as she was meant to." Darius's mouth twisted. "You've let her rot your judgment." Karl stepped closer. "My judgment built this kingdom. Do not question it again." A stunned silence followed. Then he turned to Enid. His tone softened just enough for her ears alone. "Come with me." She followed him through the gates as the crowd parted, heart thundering. When they reached the great hall, he stopped and faced her. "You're either the ruin of everything I've built," he said quietly, "or the reason it survives." Enid swallowed. "Which do you believe?" "I haven't decided." He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes reflecting both exhaustion and something deeper. "But I can't stop thinking of you." Her breath caught. He stepped past her before she could answer, voice low. "Rest, healer. Tomorrow we'll decide what to do with you." When he was gone, Enid stood alone in the echoing hall, her pulse racing. She knew what she should feel: fear, confusion, but the emotion that filled her chest was far more dangerous.
Hope.
And something that might one day destroy them both. The fortress was restless again. It always was when the king returned from war. But this time the air felt different, heavier, like a storm waiting to break. Carl's victory over the Red Fang should have brought celebration, but instead it brought tension. The warriors murmured about the king's decisions, about how his uncle no longer stood at his shoulder in council, about the Omega healer who had somehow wormed her way into his favor. Enid could feel the weight of their stares wherever she went. Mara cornered her outside the kitchens one morning, her arms folded. "The king may trust you," she whispered, "but the others don't. You're a spark in a room full of oil. One careless breath, and everything burns." "I don't want to cause trouble," Enid said softly. "Then stop healing," Mara snapped. Enid didn't reply. She couldn't, not when a stable boy had come to her that morning with a broken wrist. Not when her hands still tingled faintly with the warmth of power. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Carl summoned his council to the great hall. Enid wasn't meant to be there, but she passed close enough to hear raised voices echoing off the stone. Darius's voice led them. "She's infected the pack," he growled. "You can't see it because you don't want to.
Our warriors are soft.
Our servants laugh when they should bow. All because of her." Carl's answer was cool. "They live without fear. That is strength, not weakness." Darius barked a bitter laugh. "You sound like your father. And you remember how that ended." There was a pause, a heartbeat of silence, so sharp it cut the air. "Careful," Carl said quietly. "Someone must be—" Darius spat. "You're blind, nephew. This Omega's witchcraft will undo us all." "Enough." Carl's voice cracked like thunder. "She heals when I command it. No more. No less. Speak against my orders again, and I'll remind you who is king here." The scrape of chairs followed. Enid ducked into the shadows before the doors opened. She pressed a hand to her racing heart as Darius swept past, his eyes gleaming like ice. He didn't see her, but somehow, she felt certain he knew she'd been there. That night, she dreamed of fire, of Darius's face in the glow, smiling as the world burned again. 2 days later, she was called to Carl's chambers. When she entered, he stood by the window, his tunic undone, a dark stain of blood spreading beneath the fabric. "My lord," she rushed forward. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, but his wince betrayed him. "Sit," she ordered before her fear could catch up to her. The command shocked them both. He blinked at her, then, to her disbelief, he obeyed. She tore away the torn fabric to reveal a deep gash across his ribs. "This isn't nothing," she said.
Who did this?
"Training accident." His tone was too casual. "Liar," she murmured. His eyes lifted, sharp and gold. "You forget yourself." "Then forgive me," she said, her voice steady now. "But I won't let you bleed to death out of pride." Her hands glowed with pale silver light. Carl's breath hitched as warmth spread through his body, the torn flesh knitting beneath her touch. The closeness between them was unbearable, her pulse racing, his scent wrapping around her like smoke. "You risked everything again," he said quietly. "For what?" "For you," she whispered. The words escaped before she could stop them. Her hands faltered, but he caught them, his grip firm. For a moment, time froze. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist where her pulse raced. "You should be afraid of me," he said softly. "I was," she admitted. "Once." His lips curved slightly. "And now?" "Now," she breathed. I'm not sure what I am. Something shifted in his eyes. Something dangerous, hungry, human. He leaned forward, and for one trembling instant, the space between them disappeared. Then a knock shattered it. "Your Majesty," a voice called from beyond the door. Urgent word from the southern ridge. Carl's jaw tightened. He stood quickly, the moment gone like smoke. "Later," he said, but his tone was strained. Enid bowed and fled before her knees gave out. That night, the fortress seemed too quiet. She couldn't sleep. The warmth of his touch haunted her, as did the way his eyes had softened when she said "for you."
But the peace didn't last.
Sometime past midnight, she woke to the sound of boots in the corridor. Harsh voices. The metallic scent of fear. "Open the door, Omega," someone snarled. She froze. Darius's voice. Enid backed away from the door, heart pounding. The handle rattled, then gave way with a splintering crack as the door burst inward. Darius stepped through, flanked by 2 armored guards. His smile was thin, deadly. "The king isn't here to protect you this time," he said. "And I think we've both known this moment would come." Enid's mouth went dry. "You can't. I can do whatever is necessary for the pack." He nodded to the guards.
"Take her."
Quietly. "The king will wake to find her gone, an unfortunate escape, perhaps. Or a body lost to the river." They moved toward her, blades glinting. Enid's instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. She stumbled backward until her hands found the small table by the wall. She grabbed the nearest thing, a metal candle holder, and swung wildly. It cracked against one guard's helmet, sending him reeling. She tried to dart past the other, but he caught her arm, twisting hard. Pain flared white-hot. "Enough," Darius snapped. "End it." The door exploded open again, and the world filled with a roar. Carl filled the doorway, his eyes burning gold, his wolf just beneath his skin.
"Let
her go." The guards froze. Darius recovered first. "Nephew, this is madness. She's..." Carl crossed the distance in a blur, one hand closing around his uncle's throat. "Touch her again," he growled, "and I'll show you what madness truly is." Darius choked out a laugh. "You'd kill your own blood for her?" Carl's grip tightened. "For my pack," he said coldly. "For order." He threw Darius to the floor.
"Leave.
"Before I forget your family." The older man rose slowly, rubbing his neck, hatred blazing in his pale eyes. "This isn't over," he said. "You can't protect her forever." He stalked out, the guards trailing behind. Carl turned to Enid. His hands shook faintly, not from fear but from the strain of holding back his wolf. "Are you hurt?" She nodded, breathless. "Just shaken." He stepped closer, brushing a lock of hair from her face with surprising tenderness. "He'll try again," he said. "And next time, I might not arrive in time." "Then teach me to defend myself," she said suddenly. He blinked. "You..." "Yes." Her voice was steady now. "I won't be prey anymore." He studied her a long moment, then nodded slowly.
"At dawn," he said.
"Meet me in the training yard." And for the first time since she'd been bought, Enid realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to fight back. The mountain air before dawn was bitter, sharp enough to cut skin. Mist coiled low across the fortress courtyard, swallowing sound. Enid stood barefoot in the dirt, her breath rising in soft white clouds, her body aching from restless sleep. Carl arrived without escort, dressed in plain black leathers instead of royal armor. His hair was damp from the morning wash, and faint scars traced the lines of his forearms. Old battles, old ghosts. "You came," he said simply. "You told me to," she replied, straightening her back even as her nerves fluttered. He tossed her a short wooden staff. "We start small." "I'm not a warrior," she reminded him. "You weren't a slave either," he said, stepping closer. "But you adapted." The lesson began with stance, balance, breath, control. He moved with lethal grace, demonstrating each motion with effortless precision. Enid mimicked him, stumbling, correcting, trying again. When she fell for the third time, she laughed, a soft, startled sound that made him pause mid-step. You find this amusing? He asked, but his mouth curved faintly. Falling's better than bleeding, she said, brushing dirt from her palms. That's improvement. Then you're improving fast. The morning passed in rhythm. Strike, block, recover, repeat. Sweat slicked her skin. The first time she landed a clean hit on his forearm, her heart lurched in triumph. Carl only raised a brow. Again. By the time the sun cleared the peaks, her muscles screamed and her arms trembled. Still, she met his gaze squarely. You're stubborn, he said. You're surprised? His laugh was low, unexpected.
No.
Only impressed. Something unspoken passed between them then, an understanding born of pain and persistence. When he finally called an end, he stepped closer, close enough that his breath brushed her hair. You have spirit, Enid. But strength isn't only in the body. It's knowing when to stand and when to endure. I've endured enough, she whispered. His hand brushed her shoulder, warm and steady, then learned to stand. In the days that followed, the courtyard became their unspoken meeting ground. At dawn, before the fortress stirred, they trained. Each morning brought fewer words, more trust. Carl taught her how to shift her weight, how to anticipate a strike, how to read the movements of others. Enid's bruises turned to calluses, her hesitance to precision. Rowan found them once and stared openly. You're teaching her? Carl didn't look away from Enid. She's part of my pack. Rowan grunted, the closest thing he ever gave to approval. Word spread quietly and Omega training with the Alpha King. The murmurs carried awe, confusion, envy. Even Darius heard them, though no one dared speak of his reaction aloud. One evening, after training, Carl motioned for her to follow him to the high battlements. The sky was bleeding gold and crimson, the wind cold against their skin. He leaned on the parapet, watching the horizon. When I was young, he said quietly, I thought power meant control, the ability to bend others to my will. And now I'm not sure. Enid studied him. The king who commanded armies now looked human.
Tired.
You're changing things, she said softly. They'll hate you for it. They already do. He turned to her. My uncle won't stop. He'll strike when he thinks I'm weakest. Then let me help, she said. You already do. The sincerity in his voice left her breathless. They stood in silence for a long while, the wind tangling their hair. The distance between them narrowed until his hand brushed hers, tentative, searching. Her pulse quickened. She didn't pull away. Enid, his voice was rough now, uncertain for the first time. But before he could speak further, Rowan burst onto the wall. My king. Urgent word. Carl stiffened. What is it? Scouts report movement to the East Ridge. A fire at one of the supply outposts. Darius's territory. Carl's expression hardened. Ready my horse. I'll ride within the hour. Rowan hesitated, glancing at Enid. And her? Carl looked at her a moment longer than he should have. She stays. That night, Enid couldn't rest. The fortress buzzed with rumors, sabotage, betrayal, a stolen cache of weapons. Every whisper carried Darius's name, though no one dared say it outright. By dawn, the riders returned carrying wounded. Carl among them, blood streaking his sleeve. He found her before anyone else could. I told you to stay, he said, half angry, half exhausted. I did, she answered, pressing her hands to his wound without waiting for permission. Now stop talking before you faint. He tried to protest, but the warmth of her healing silenced him. His body relaxed beneath her touch, his heartbeat steadying. Every time you fix me, he murmured, you make it harder for me to remember what we're supposed to be. What's that? King and subject. Her hands faltered. And what are we really? He didn't answer. He just caught her wrist gently, guiding her palm against his heart. The steady thud beneath her fingers said everything words couldn't. Unseen, in the corridor outside, Darius watched. His expression was calm, but his eyes gleamed with something dark and final. The next move, he decided, would be his. And when it came, It would end this foolish softness once and for all. The moon rose red that night, swollen and heavy, its light turning the mountain fortress into a landscape of rust and shadow. The blood moon. An omen of endings. Enid felt it before she heard it, the shift in the air, the quiet before the storm. The hairs on her arms rose. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. But this time, it wasn't celebration. It was warning. She sat up in her small quarters, senses prickling. The corridors beyond her door were too still.
Too silent.
Then came the scream. Enid bolted to her feet. Boots thundered in the hallway outside, followed by the metallic clang of steel. She grabbed the staff Carl had given her and ran. The fortress was chaos. Soldiers clashed in the courtyards. The air stank of smoke and blood. Darius's banner, Black Wolf on a red field, fluttered above the eastern wall. He'd made his move. "Where's the king?" she cried to a passing guard. The man fell before he could answer, a blade buried in his back. Enid stumbled away, heart hammering. She didn't know where to go, who to trust. Then Rowan appeared through the smoke, blood streaking his face. "Enid, where is he?" "The throne hall. Darius has him cornered." Rowan's voice broke into a growl. "He means to finish it." Enid didn't think.
She ran.
The corridors blurred. Her lungs burned. She burst through the heavy doors into the great hall and froze. The grand chamber, that once glittered with banners and firelight, was now a ruin of battle. Bodies littered the marble. The throne stood empty, its base slick with blood. At the far end, Carl and Darius circled each other like predators. Carl's tunic was torn, his chest heaving. Darius's blade dripped crimson. "You think mercy will save you?" Darius sneered. "It makes you weak, just like your father. You should have listened." Carl's golden eyes glowed with fury. "I listened too long. You poisoned everything I built. Everything we built." Darius roared, lunging. Their blades met with a ringing clash that shook the hall. Sparks flew. Carl struck low. Darius countered, fast as a striking snake. They fought like mirror images, strength against cunning, fury against calculation. But Darius had allies. From the shadows, his loyal guards emerged, wolves of his old faction, eyes burning with fanatic devotion. Carl fought them all. For a moment, he was unstoppable, his movements a storm of steel and sinew. But numbers wore him down. Blood slicked his ribs, and his breath came in ragged gasps. "Carl!" Enid screamed, rushing forward. He saw her, and that split second of distraction was all it took. Darius struck. The blade sank between Carl's ribs with sickening precision. He staggered, the light in his eyes flickering. "No!" Enid's scream ripped through the hall. She darted forward, staff raised, and slammed it into Darius's wrist. Bone cracked. His dagger clattered to the floor. For an instant, shock flared across his face. Then rage consumed it. "You," he snarled, drawing a second knife. "You did this. You broke him." He lunged, but Enid was no longer prey. She ducked beneath the strike and drove the staff into his stomach with all her strength. He doubled over with a snarl. She swung again, and again, until his knife clattered across the stone. Darius caught the staff mid-swing, wrenching it from her hands. His face twisted with hate. "You think you can fight me, Omega? You're nothing." A low growl rumbled behind him. Carl rose, barely standing, his hand slick with blood but his eyes burning gold again. "She's everything," he rasped, and with the last of his strength, he drove his claws through Darius's chest. The sound was final, a wet, brutal thud. Darius's eyes went wide, disbelief frozen in them as he crumpled to the floor. Carl swayed once, twice, and fell. Enid caught him before he hit the stone. "Carl, no, stay with me." His blood soaked her hands. The wound was deep, poisoned. She could smell the metallic tang of silver. "Don't," he whispered, his voice a ghost. "Don't waste your power." "Shut up," she said fiercely, pressing her glowing hands to his chest. "You're not dying here." Her light flared bright as moonfire, flooding the hall with silver radiance. The poison fought her, burning her veins, but she didn't stop. Her body trembled. Her vision blurred. She poured everything she was into him. Her life, her strength, her wolf. "Come back to me," she begged. "Please don't leave me alone again." His breathing hitched, then steadied. Color returned to his face. The wound sealed, leaving only a faint scar beneath her trembling hands. When his eyes finally opened, gold meeting gray, the relief that tore through her was so powerful it hurt. "You never listen," he murmured weakly. "Neither do you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before exhaustion dragged him under. She collapsed beside him, tears hot on her cheeks. Around them, the fortress lay in silence. The war, the betrayal, the blood, all of it had led here. And as she knelt beside the king she'd once feared, the man she'd saved more times than she could count, Enid realized that the old world had died with Darius. What came next would be something new. If Carl lived. If she did. If mercy truly could rebuild what cruelty had destroyed. When Enid woke, the first thing she heard was silence. Not the suffocating kind that haunted the slave markets or the fortress dungeons. This silence was clean, calm, alive. Her eyelids fluttered open. Morning light spilled across the chamber, golden and soft. She lay in Carl's bed, the same bed she'd once been afraid to even approach. Her body ached, every muscle wrung out from the battle and the healing that had nearly drained her dry. For a moment, she didn't move. She just breathed. The door creaked. Rowan entered quietly, bandages wrapped around one arm. His expression softened when he saw her eyes open. "You did it," he said simply. "He's alive." Enid pushed herself upright. "Where is he?" "Where he belongs." She swung her legs from the bed, ignoring the protest of her body, and followed Rowan down the corridor. The fortress was changed. The banners that had borne Darius's sigil were gone. Warriors stood guard, not with suspicion but with pride. Servants moved with purpose, not fear. Children's laughter echoed faintly through the halls. When they reached the courtyard, she stopped. Carl stood before the assembled pack, dressed not in armor but in simple black, his golden eyes bright with life. The scar from Darius's blade cut a pale line across his chest, a reminder, not a weakness. When he saw her, something in his posture softened. "Enid," he said quietly, "come forward." The crowd parted for her like water. She wanted to kneel. Habit, instinct, fear, all urged her to bow before the Alpha King. But he shook his head. "No more kneeling," he said, voice clear enough for all to hear. "Not for you." He reached out his hand. She took it. Carl turned to his people. "We were ruled by fear," he began. "We believed pain made us strong. But pain only taught us how to survive, not how to live. That ends today." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "This woman," he continued, his gaze finding hers, "taught us the difference. She healed our wounds when we would have let them fester. She reminded us that strength without compassion is hollow." He stepped closer to her, their hands still joined. "From this day, the pack will honor the light of the healers as much as the claws of the warriors. We rise together, or not at all." He turned to her again, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You freed me from my ghosts, Enid. Now, let me free you from yours." Her throat tightened. "What do you mean?" He smiled, small, real, weary. "You were brought here as property. You'll stay here as queen." Gasps rippled through the pack. Enid stared at him, stunned. "Carl." He touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the faint scar she'd earned fighting Darius's men. "You risked everything for me. For all of us. You saw something worth saving when I only saw ruin." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm no queen. Neither was I born a king," he said softly. "But we became what the world demanded of us. Together, we'll make it something better." He bent his head, not for command or dominance, but reverence. The mighty Alpha King bowed to an Omega before all who watched. Then, slowly, she bowed back. When their foreheads touched, A murmur spread through the gathered wolves, a low, rising sound that became a howl. One by one, they lifted their heads and joined the chorus, a call not of war but renewal. The pack howled for them, for a healer and a king who had dared to love. That night, the moon rose silver and full. Carl found her in the gardens, where she'd replanted the herbs that had once been burned on Darius's orders. The air was rich with lavender and earth. "You should be resting," she said without turning. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I rest better when you're near." She leaned back against him, her head fitting perfectly beneath his chin. "You almost died," she whispered. "So did you." "I would have if you hadn't come." He smiled against her hair. "Seems we're even then." They stood like that for a long while, the night quiet except for the hum of distant crickets. "I don't know if I'm ready to be queen," she murmured. "Good," he said. "Neither do I know how to be the kind of king this world needs. But maybe that's the point." He turned her gently to face him, his hand cupping her jaw. "We'll learn together." The kiss that followed wasn't born of desperation or fear. As before, it was something steadier, deeper. A promise rather than a plea. The moonlight wrapped them both in silver, the healer and the wolf, two broken pieces that had found each other in a world built on cruelty. Weeks later, the fortress began to bloom again. Training still echoed through the courtyards, but now laughter followed the clash of steel. Wolves learned not only how to fight, but how to mend. Children studied healing herbs beside sparring pits. Carl ruled through strength tempered with mercy. Enid stood beside him, not behind, her voice guiding reforms that changed their world piece by piece. The people whispered that the Omega had tamed the Alpha King. But those who saw them together knew the truth. She hadn't tamed him. She had healed him. And in return, he had given her something even rarer than freedom. A home. Under the silver light of the moon, they rebuilt the world. Not with teeth or fear, but with the quiet, unshakable power of compassion. And so, the Omega no one wanted became the queen no one dared to dream of. A healer who mended not just wounds but hearts. A king who learned that true power isn't in conquest, it's in compassion. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt her pain, her courage, and the way love can rise even from ruin, then stay with us. Because this world still has more secrets, more kings to fall, more broken hearts to heal. Subscribe for more dark fantasy love stories, where power meets vulnerability and mercy changes everything. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing in a world of wolves is a heart that dares to love.